"Where's your car, Anabel?" my dad asked, glancing at the empty driveway. I looked him straight in the eye and said calmly, "My husband and his mom were pressuring me, and I am tired of fighting them, so I gave it to them." The silence that followed was thick. My dad's face turned red. My mom's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. My younger brother stopped scrolling on his phone and stared at me. "You what?" Dad finally managed. I didn't flinch. I simply smiled and repeated myself. "I gave them the car. They wanted it, so I let them have it." What they didn't know was that I had been planning this moment for 3 months. Every detail had been carefully arranged. Every document had been signed. Every backup plan was in place. My husband, Keith, and his mother, Brenda, thought they had finally broken me. They thought the quiet, agreeable wife had finally given up her last bit of independence. They had no idea what was actually coming. My name is Anabel Foster, and I'm 32 years old. 3 years ago, I married Keith Patterson, a man I thought was my soulmate. We met at a charity event where I was volunteering. He seemed kind, funny, and supportive of my career as a pediatric nurse. 6 months into our marriage, things started changing. His mother, Brenda, began visiting more often. She had opinions about everything: how I decorated our home, what I cooked, how I dressed, even how I wore my hair. Keith always took her side. "She's just trying to help," he'd say whenever I complained. The real problems started when my father gifted me a brand new SUV for my 30th birthday. It was beautiful, silver, with all the features I'd dreamed about. Dad had saved for 2 years to surprise me. Keith's reaction surprised me. "That's too much car for you," he said the day I brought it home. "You don't even need something that nice." Brenda was worse. "Such an expensive gift creates inequality in a marriage," she announced during Sunday dinner. Over the next year, the pressure became constant. Keith would mention how his old sedan was breaking down, how embarrassing it was to drive clients around in a car with a broken air conditioner, how my SUV just sat in the driveway most days since I often carpooled with other nurses. "It would make more sense for me to use it," he'd say casually. "You can take my car." His beaten-up sedan had 180,000 miles on it. The passenger window didn't roll down. The check engine light had been on for 6 months. But every time I refused, Keith would give me the silent treatment for days. Brenda made it worse. She'd drop comments during family gatherings. "A good wife supports her husband's career," or "Some women are just selfish with material things." I loved Keith. I wanted to make him happy, but something about giving up my father's gift felt wrong. That car represented my dad's love and sacrifice. It was the one thing that was completely mine. Still, the pressure kept building. Keith started borrowing my car without asking. 3 months ago, everything came to a head. I came home from a double shift at the hospital, exhausted and ready to collapse. Keith and Brenda were sitting at our kitchen table with papers spread out in front of them. "We need to talk," Keith said, not even looking up. Brenda smiled her fake smile. "Anabel, dear, we've been thinking about what's best for this family." Keith slid a paper across the table. "I need you to sign the car over to me. It's the right thing to do. My career is growing, and I need reliable transportation. You can use my car for your little nursing job." My little nursing job, the job that paid half our mortgage. I stared at the transfer papers. They'd already filled everything out. All they needed was my signature. "This is what married couples do," Brenda added. "They share, they sacrifice for each other." Something inside me snapped. Not with anger, but with clarity. I suddenly saw my future, a lifetime of giving up everything while they took and took. I looked at Keith and said, "I need some time to think about this." His face darkened. "What's there to think about? This is about us, about our future." I said I need time, I repeated calmly. Brenda stood up, her chair scraping loudly. "Keith warned me you could be stubborn. I told him that's what happens when fathers spoil their daughters." After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from determination. I pulled out my phone and called my dad. When he answered, I didn't cry or complain. I simply asked, Dad, do you remember your lawyer friend, Mr. Harrison? The one who helped you with your business. I need his number. Dad didn't ask questions. He just gave me the information. That night, while Keith snored beside me, I started researching. I looked up property laws, marital assets, and gift documentation. I found out that the car was legally mine since it was a gift from my father before the marriage troubles started. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrison. He was a sharp man in his 60s who had helped my dad with various legal matters over the years. "Your father mentioned you might call," he said warmly. "What can I help you with?" I explained everything: the pressure, the demands, Keith's attitude, Brenda's manipulation. I told him about the transfer papers they'd prepared. "Don't sign anything," he advised immediately. "Let me ask you something. What else have they been pressuring you about?" I thought about it. Keith wants me to add his name to my savings account, the one I had before we got married, and Brenda keeps hinting that I should quit my job and focus on being a better wife. There was a long pause. "Anabel, I think we need to meet in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" I could. Keith thought I was working a day's shift, but I'd actually taken a personal day. At Mr. Harrison's office, he laid out options I'd never considered. "Here's what I'm seeing," Mr. Harrison said, leaning back in his chair. "This isn't just about a car. This is a pattern of control. Your husband and his mother are systematically trying to strip away your independence." He was right. I hadn't wanted to see it before, but the evidence was clear. "What can I do?" I asked. "First, we protect your assets. The car stays in your name. Your savings account stays separate. Second, we document everything. Every demand, every manipulation, every instance where they pressure you. And third," he paused, looking at me carefully, "third, you decide what kind of marriage you want, because this current situation isn't sustainable." I left his office with a plan. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly gathered evidence. I saved text messages where Keith demanded the car. I recorded conversations where Brenda called me selfish. I documented every time Keith borrowed my car without permission. I also did something else, something they'd never expect. I contacted a car dealership, not just any dealership, but the one where my father had purchased my SUV. I explained my situation to the manager, a kind woman named Patricia who remembered my dad. "I need to do something unusual," I told her, "and I need your help." What I proposed made her smile. "That's brilliant," she said. "Let me make some calls." Over the next month, I played along with Keith and Brenda's pressure. I acted tired, worn down, like I was finally ready to give in. Keith noticed the change and became almost cheerful. "I knew you'd come around," he said one evening. "We're a team, right?" I nodded, hiding my real thoughts. Meanwhile, I met with Mr. Harrison 3 more times. We prepared documents, reviewed options, and created a timeline. Everything had to happen in the right order. I also talked to my parents, but only my dad knew the full plan. Mom would worry too much. "Are you sure about this?" Dad asked during one of our private conversations. "I've never been more sure of anything," I told my dad. He looked at me with pride. "You're stronger than I realized. Your mother and I raised you right." 2 months after that kitchen table confrontation, I was ready. Keith and Brenda had been pressuring me daily. The tension at home was unbearable. Keith had even started giving me ultimatums. "If you don't transfer that car by the end of the week, we have serious problems," he said coldly. I called a family dinner at my parents' house. Keith was annoyed but agreed. Brenda insisted on coming, which was perfect for my plan. That Sunday, everyone gathered. My parents, my brother, Keith, and Brenda. The atmosphere was tense. Keith kept checking his watch, clearly wanting to leave. After dinner, before anyone could escape, I stood up. "I have an announcement," I said calmly. Everyone looked at me. Keith smiled, probably thinking I was finally going to publicly surrender the car to him. "I've made a decision about the car situation," I continued. Keith leaned forward eagerly. Brenda actually clasped her hands together like she was watching her favorite show. "I've decided," I said slowly, "to give them what they want. I'm transferring ownership of my SUV. My mom gasped. My dad's face was carefully neutral. My brother looked confused. Keith stood up. Finally, see, Mom, I told you she'd see reason eventually. However, I continued, holding up my hand, there are conditions. Keith's smile faltered. Conditions? What conditions? I pulled out an envelope from my purse. First, Keith, you'll need to sign this document acknowledging that the car was a gift from my father and that you're accepting it as a transfer of marital property. Why does that matter? Brenda asked suspiciously. For tax purposes, I said smoothly, and for clarity. Mr. Harrison had prepared this document carefully. It contained several important clauses that Keith, in his eagerness, wouldn't bother reading carefully. Fine, whatever, Keith said, practically grabbing the pen from my hand. He signed without reading it. Brenda watched proudly, like her son had just won a prize. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out another paper. Since the car was a gift from my father, he needs to be present for the official transfer. Dad. My father stood up, his face serious. Keith, before my daughter completes this transfer, I want to make sure you understand the value of what you're receiving. Keith looked annoyed. I know it's a nice car, sir. I'll take good care of it. It's not just about the car, Dad continued. It's about respect. My daughter works hard. She deserves to be treated as an equal partner, not pressured into giving up her belongings. Brenda made a dismissive sound. With all due respect, Mr. Foster, this is between husband and wife. You're being too sentimental about a vehicle. My dad's eyes went cold. I see. Well then, if this is just about a vehicle and not about my daughter's happiness, let's proceed. The next day, Keith and I went to the DMV. I signed the transfer papers. His name went on the title. He was grinning the entire time. I can't believe you actually did it, Keith said as we left the DMV. Mom is going to be so happy. I smiled. I hope you enjoy the car. That evening, Keith couldn't stop talking about his new SUV. He called friends to brag. He took photos. Brenda came over to celebrate, bringing an expensive bottle of wine. This is what marriage is about, she announced. Compromise and putting the family first. I nodded along, playing my part perfectly. What they didn't know was that the document Keith had signed at my parents' house wasn't just about the car transfer. Buried in the legal language was an acknowledgement that this was his separate property, acquired through transfer, and that he assumed all financial responsibility for it, including the remaining loan balance. The loan balance that I'd refinanced just 2 weeks earlier. The one that now had his name attached as the sole responsible party. But the real surprise was still coming. I just had to wait 3 more days. 3 days later, while Keith was at work, I packed my essential belongings. Not everything, just important documents, clothes, and personal items. I'd been slowly moving things to my parents' house for 2 weeks. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Keith, I've gone to stay with my parents for a while. I need space to think about our marriage. Please don't contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Then I drove away in my new car. The one Patricia at the dealership had helped me acquire quietly over the past month. A modest sedan, paid in full, registered only in my name. When Keith came home and found my note, he called me 17 times. I ignored every call. Finally, he called my parents' house. My dad answered. She's here, and she's not ready to talk to you. This is ridiculous, Keith shouted loud enough that I could hear him. She can't just leave. She can, my dad replied calmly, and she did. The next morning, Keith showed up at my parents' house. My dad met him at the door and didn't let him in. I need to see my wife, Keith demanded. Anabel needs space, Dad replied firmly. You should respect that. This is about the car, isn't it? Keith's voice got louder. She's mad that I finally got what I deserved. My brother, who was visiting, stepped out onto the porch. At 6'3" and a former college linebacker, his presence usually discouraged confrontation. You should leave, my brother said simply. Keith left, but not before shouting threats about lawyers and divorce. Inside the house, I sat with my mom drinking tea. My hands weren't shaking. I felt calm, clearer than I had in months. "Are you sure about this path?" Mom asked gently. "Marriage is work, honey. Sometimes we have to compromise." "Mom," I said, looking at her, "there's a difference between compromise and erasure. Keith didn't want a partner. He wanted someone who'd give him everything while demanding nothing in return." She squeezed my hand. She didn't fully understand yet, but she would. A week passed. Keith called constantly. His messages evolved from angry to apologetic to desperate. Brenda called too, leaving voicemails about how I was destroying my marriage and embarrassing their family. I ignored all of them. Instead, I met with Mr. Harrison again. "It's time for phase 2, I told him. He nodded. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "Absolutely." Mr. Harrison sent Keith a letter. A formal, legal letter outlining several important facts. First, that the car transfer was complete and legal. Second, that according to the document Keith had signed, he had accepted full financial responsibility for the vehicle, including the loan balance of $35,000 that I'd refinanced before the transfer. Third, and most importantly, that I was filing for legal separation with the intention to divorce. Keith called me within an hour of receiving the letter. I answered this time. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. "You can't do this." "I already did," I replied calmly. "You wanted the car, you got it, along with everything that comes with it. The loan, you stuck me with the loan. You signed the papers, Keith. You accepted responsibility, it's all legal." I could hear Brenda in the background, shrieking something about fraud and lawyers. "You tricked me," Keith yelled. "No," I corrected. "I gave you exactly what you demanded. You just didn't bother to read what you were signing. That's not my fault." "My lawyer will destroy you," he threatened. "Your lawyer will find that everything was done properly. Mr. Harrison made sure of that. You wanted the car more than you wanted to understand what you were agreeing to." I hung up before he could respond. The truth was even sweeter than he realized. When I'd refinanced the loan, I'd removed my name completely. The dealership had helped me structure it so that the new loan was in his name only, secured by the vehicle. It was all completely legal because Keith had signed documents acknowledging the transfer and accepting the financial obligations. Mr. Harrison had been brilliant. Every paper, every signature, every clause had been carefully crafted. 2 days later, Keith tried a different approach. He showed up at the hospital where I worked, waiting in the parking lot. When my shift ended, he was leaning against his SUV, my former SUV. "Can we please talk?" he asked, his voice softer. I stopped but maintained distance. "What do you want, Keith?" "I made mistakes, I see that now. But this loan, Anabel, it's killing me. I can't afford the payments." "You should have thought about that before pressuring me for months to give you the car." "Please," he said, and I almost believed the desperation in his voice. "Can't we work something out? I'll sell the car, we'll split the money, and we can start over." I shook my head. "The car is worth less than the loan balance. You're underwater on it. If you sell it, you'll still owe thousands." His face went pale. He hadn't realized that either. "You really planned this," he whispered. "All of it." "I protected myself," I corrected. "There's a difference." Keith's next move was to bring Brenda to my parents' house. Dad refused to let them in, but they stood on the lawn, making a scene. "You're destroying my son," Brenda shouted. "He's a good man, and you're ruining him over a car." I opened the door and stepped out. "No, Brenda. You ruined him by teaching him that manipulation and pressure are how you get what you want in a relationship. How dare you speak to me that way? How dare you spend a year making me feel small?" I shot back. "How dare you call my job little? How dare you tell me I'm selfish for wanting to keep a gift from my father?" Keith tried to intervene. "Anabel, please, let's be adults about this." "I am being an adult," I said firmly. "I'm setting boundaries, I'm protecting my assets, I'm refusing to be controlled. Those are all adult actions." My brother appeared in the doorway behind me. "I think you both should leave now." They left, but not before Brenda threatened to tell everyone in our social circle what a terrible wife I was. She followed through on that threat. Within days, several mutual friends called me. Some were supportive. Others seemed to think I'd overreacted. "It's just a car," one friend said. "Was it really worth your marriage?" "It was never about the car," I explained. "It was about respect, about being seen as an equal, about not being manipulated." Some friends got it, others didn't. I learned quickly who my real friends were. Meanwhile, Keith's financial situation was deteriorating. The car payment was $580 a month. He'd been counting on me to help with bills, but I'd moved out. His salary alone couldn't cover everything. He tried to refinance the loan, but his credit wasn't good enough to get better terms. He tried to sell the car, but like I'd said, he was underwater on the loan. He even tried to return it to the dealership. Patricia called to tell me about that visit. "He demanded we take it back," she laughed. "Said his wife had tricked him. I showed him all the papers he'd signed. He left pretty angry." 1 month after I'd moved out, Keith's lawyer contacted Mr. Harrison. They wanted to negotiate. "What are they offering?" I asked. Mr. Harrison reviewed the proposal. "They want you to take back the car and the loan. In exchange, Keith will agree to a quick, uncontested divorce with no alimony." "No," I said immediately. "Are you sure? It would be easier." "I'm sure. Keith wanted that car so badly he was willing to destroy our marriage over it. He can keep it." The divorce proceedings began. Keith's lawyer tried every angle to prove I'd defrauded him, but every document was clean. Every signature was his. Every transfer was legal. In court, Keith's lawyer argued that I'd manipulated the situation. Mr. Harrison calmly presented the evidence. Months of text messages where Keith demanded the car, recordings of Brenda's pressure tactics, testimony from my family about the sustained campaign to make me give up my property. "My client," Mr. Harrison said, "simply gave her husband exactly what he asked for. The fact that he didn't read the terms he was agreeing to is not her fault." The judge was a woman in her 50s. She reviewed everything carefully, then looked at Keith. "Mr. Patterson, you signed multiple documents regarding this vehicle transfer. Did anyone force you to sign?" "No, but..." "Did anyone prevent you from reading the documents before signing?" "Well, no, but she knew." "What she knew," the judge interrupted, "is irrelevant. You're an adult. You signed legal documents without reading them. That's your responsibility, not hers." Keith's face turned red. Brenda, sitting in the gallery, looked like she wanted to explode. The judge continued. "Furthermore, I see evidence of sustained pressure and manipulation toward Mrs. Patterson regarding her property. Her decision to protect her assets was reasonable." The divorce was granted. The car and its loan stayed with Keith. My savings account, my new car, and my independence stayed with me. As we left the courthouse, Keith tried one last time. "Was it worth it?" he asked bitterly. "Destroying our marriage over pride." I looked at him clearly. "I didn't destroy our marriage, Keith. You did. The moment you decided a car was more important than respecting me." 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my life had transformed completely. I'd moved into a small apartment near the hospital. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd been promoted at work to charge nurse, with a significant raise. The irony wasn't lost on me that my little nursing job now paid more than Keith's career ever had. My brother told me that Keith had eventually defaulted on the car loan. The SUV was repossessed. He tried to blame me publicly, but most people who knew the full story sided with me. Brenda had stopped speaking to my family entirely, which everyone agreed was a blessing. One evening, my dad came to visit my new apartment. He brought groceries and helped me assemble a bookshelf. "I'm proud of you, Anabel," he said as we worked. "Not because of what you did to Keith, but because you stood up for yourself." "I learned from the best," I replied. "You taught me that gifts have meaning, that love means respect, not control." He smiled. "Your mother was worried you'd be bitter." "I'm not bitter," I told him honestly. "I'm free." And I was. For the first time in years, I made decisions without worrying about Keith's reaction or Brenda's judgment. I decorated my apartment how I wanted. I took extra shifts when I felt like it. I said no without explaining myself. I even started dating again, casually. Nothing serious yet, but it was nice to meet people who saw me as an equal from the start. Through mutual friends, I heard that Keith had moved back in with Brenda. His career had stalled after the stress of our divorce. He was driving an old pickup truck, still paying off debts from the repossessed SUV. Some people said I should feel guilty, that I'd been too harsh, that I'd punished him too severely for what was essentially just asking for a car. But those people didn't understand. It was never about the car. It was about the pattern of taking, of diminishing, of slowly erasing who I was until nothing remained but someone who said yes to everything. A year after that dinner at my parents' house, when I'd announced I was giving Keith the car, I attended a fundraiser at the hospital. It was a fancy event, and I'd bought a new dress for the occasion. Halfway through the evening, I spotted Keith across the room. He was there with a date, a woman I didn't recognize. He looked older somehow, tired. Our eyes met briefly. He looked away first. I didn't feel triumph or vindication. I just felt neutral, like seeing a stranger who vaguely resembled someone from my past. Later that evening, Patricia from the dealership approached me. She'd been invited as a sponsor. "I heard Keith was here," she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied honestly. "He's just someone I used to know." She smiled. "You know, that whole situation became legendary at our dealership. We use it as a teaching moment about reading contracts before signing." I laughed, happy to provide educational value. "Seriously, though," Patricia continued, "what you did took courage. A lot of women stay in situations like that because leaving seems harder than enduring." As I drove home that night in my reliable sedan, I thought about everything that had happened. The pressure, the manipulation, the careful planning, the legal battles, and finally, the freedom. Some people thought I'd been calculating and cold. Maybe I had been, but sometimes protecting yourself requires careful planning. Sometimes love isn't enough when there's no respect. Keith had asked if destroying our marriage was worth it. He still didn't understand that he'd destroyed the marriage long before I gave him that car. Every dismissive comment about my job, every time he took my vehicle without asking, every moment he prioritized his mother's opinions over my feelings, those had destroyed our marriage. I'd just been the one brave enough to walk away. My phone buzzed with a text from my dad. "Sunday dinner tomorrow. Your mom's making your favorite." I smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." As I pulled into my apartment complex, I noticed my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked different than I had a year ago. Stronger, calmer, more myself. The car Keith had wanted so desperately was gone, repossessed and sold for parts. But I was still here, still standing, still moving forward. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Not revenge, but reclamation. Not punishment, but peace. I'd given Keith exactly what he demanded, and in doing so, I'd given myself something far more valuable, my life back.